Welcome in, Bears fans, to another episode of Bare Bones. I am Mason West and joined Khari Thompson. Khari, how you doing today?
Doing wonderfully. How are you, gentlemen?
Overall, not too shabby. And of course, we have with us Brad Spielberger, known as at PFF Brad on Bears Twitter. But Brad, I don't really that's not really going to stick too long, is it? Are you GCS Brad now?
Yeah, I'm trying to get all the Elon bucks I can with my my verification badge for the next 3 days. But then Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. I don't know what the title is going to be yet. It's still we're workshopping it, but it will not be PFF Brad.
So if you haven't heard, first of all, if you haven't heard, it's crazy because Brad does an amazing job on Twitter with what he's been doing over at PFF. He had one of the most amazing things I saw this offseason with that free agent list he had was nailing it in terms of some of those contract predictions for some of those agents. But big congratulations to a friend of the podcast, Brad Spielberger, like I said, who is leaving PFF after a fantastic run to become the director of football administration at Grand Central Sports Management. He's going to kill it. So what does that mean for you, this change in your Bears Twitter presence or lack thereof? Like, what does it mean going forward?
Well, first of all, thank you, man. I appreciate it a ton. Yeah, so I'm going to be a contract negotiator for an agency. So as opposed to kind of pontificating in the public sphere, going to be doing it, and going to battle with GMs and whatnot, and helping our guys get paid. So, yeah, look, I'll be on Twitter. There are agents on Twitter. I just will not be firing off takes. I'd know the same clip. I'll probably still honestly comment on contracts. I just won't give an opinion as to what I think about it. Like today, for example, like Stephon Diggs, the whole reduction in his deal and pointing out how he's not comp pick eligible. Like I'm still going to try to provide insight and help people understand things better. I just won't be, I won't have any sort of thoughts on it beyond that.
Politician Brad.
Yeah, exactly.
But we have a big show ahead of us here. So really quickly, going to run through some of the top 30 visits because someone asked me to do this. So we're going to do it. I might be missing one, might have one extra. But to rapid fire through this, Caleb Williams, ate a steak. Dylan Laub, running back, was in there. Rome Odunze, wide receiver. Jaquan Jackson, wide receiver out of Tulane. Brock Bowers, tight end, Georgia. Ben Sinnott, tight end, Kansas State. Karan Amaji, I probably butchered that. I'm sorry, Karan. Offensive tackle out of Yale. Zach Frazier, guard/center out of West Virginia. Dallas Turner, edge. Nehemiah Prickett, cornerback. Elijah Jones, cornerback. Tyler Guyton, offensive tackle. Chop Robinson, defensive end. Malik Neighbors, wide receiver. Trevor Keegan, offensive line. Graham Barton, Duke, offensive lineman. Elijah Jones, cornerback from Boston College. Cam Hart, Notre Dame corner. Andrew Phillips, Kentucky corner. And maybe Zach Zinter, offensive line of Michigan. That one's kind of a question mark. But Khari, he's seeing that list, right? Knowing about, I think it was 4 individuals were drafted, I believe, from the Bears last top 30 last year. What stands out to you?
Well, what doesn't surprise me, obviously, is Caleb Williams. I think we're probably all past that point now where we can, more or less pencil / start converting it to pen and ink it in.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe my mock has someone different. You don't know.
You never know. But I think that I've been interested in the Brock Bowers interest in particular because I think he doesn't necessarily fit into those 3 categories that apparently Ryan Poles is having people argue about in terms of edges, offensive tackles, and wide receivers at pick number 9 or trade down or what have you. But I think there's going to potentially be a discussion there, if not at 9, then maybe a little bit after. If Brock Bowers is still around and you deem that he's the best player available, you don't get, if for whatever reason you don't get one of your top offensive options and you don't necessarily like the edges enough at that point, it's like, what do you do? And I feel like I'm continually interested in the fact that he keeps on, like they're visiting with him. Clearly, they seem to be doing their homework. I find it interesting, but also Ben Sinnott. I think that tight end is a position, not just with Bowers, but I think it's a position that the Bears want to be a little bit better at depth-wise. And I mean, they did address that with Gerald Everett, signing him, obviously. But Gerald Everett's a little bit up there. He's a veteran, right? To have young talent potentially in the pipeline that can contribute down the line, potentially when Cole Kmet's contract is, obviously you want to just be constantly evaluating that position. I find it interesting.
Brad, what about you? When you look at top 30 visits in general, especially now that you're going to be on that agent side of things, and how important are these top 30 visits, and what does it mean for the Bears specifically through that list I read through?
I think it's a great note. I didn't realize they took 4 of the guys they had in last year. So that's a very good little data point from you right there. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important because sometimes we do forget. Obviously, they're watching tape, and tape matters more than everything else. But organizations want to get to know the person and just see how they interact with different people, how they are as players, how they'll fit in the locker room, all of that. I think sometimes we roll our eyes at that, but it's extremely, extremely important and very, very valuable in the process. So most of those are pretty standard. I agree. Brock Bowers is probably the most interesting one. I know someone said Guyton might be a pick at 9. I hope not. Good play. Be a first round pick. No doubt in my mind to be a first round pick, and some people don't agree there. Great, good athlete, and technique needs work. But anyway, maybe we'll talk about that later. But Bowers does stick out. I think this might surprise some people. If I'm the Bears, I'm trading down and still thinking I can get a Bowers in the teens. I don't think he's going to be a top 10 pick. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my read on it.
Interesting, because when I look at some of the mocks out there and all that, you see, I think Brock Bowers is a guy that a lot of people have penciled in for the Jets, right? Just because it makes sense. They need weapons. They're going all in with Aaron Rodgers because you kind of have to. But it's interesting for you hearing you're saying that he might drop in the teens because that piques my interest. I'm a Brock Bowers guy. I think he's a weapon. Tight end is just a moniker, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, no, sure. I think with that though, and I mean, Brad being the position value guy that you are, I mean, ultimately, yes, in theory, he's playing your move tight end, wide receiver, but as long as he's got tight end on there. And I also think that I wonder, and I know it's not fair. It shouldn't necessarily be a fair comparison. But when people look at what's happened with Kyle Pitts, taking him number 4 overall, and the lack of commensurate value for that pick, though it's like not necessarily Kyle Pitts' fault, I wonder if you're going to see it's not. But it's like, I wonder if you're going to see teams be like, yeah, I'm not taking another tight end in the top 10. Push him down the line. It's like what we've seen in the past where very good players at non-premium positions kind of get shunted towards the teens or a little bit later, and then they go and become really good for whichever team grabs them.
Yeah, no, I know. Me and Mason, I think, have even bickered about this, in the deal. Look, I think he might be the best college tight end of all time, and he is a pass catcher. We're getting to more of a positionless football. I totally appreciate that. Pitts honestly had 1,000 yards as a rookie. Like, it's not even fair that we say he's like a horror or a scare story. But TJ Hawkinson, yeah, he's one of the highest paid guys now for a team that didn't draft him. And also, my thing more with the Jets is it does make sense for all those reasons. But even a Brock Bowers, that position, I think because of the Sam Laportas and Kyle Pitts of the world, we forget that for the most part, it's a very slow developing position. It can take a year or two. You got to block. You got to obviously run routes. I think the world of Brock Bowers, but it's interesting that his, people assume he's a top 10 pick. I've heard a little bit differently, but who knows?
Moving forward, so I do want to get your perspective on this, Brad. So I wanted to bring this in. Austin Mock of The Athletic dropped an article. It's very interesting. I think worth a brief discussion here. It's a NFL projection model, which calculates the value teams have added and lost since the end of the 2023 season. The projection includes free agents and trades. Austin says the primary purpose of this model is to project the outcomes of games, but the foundation of the model is built on evaluating players. Used different advanced metrics from True Media, Pro Football Focus, yada, 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 to assign a value to every NFL player. And after assigning that value, went through every team transaction this offseason and calculated the value added or lost up through March 20th, because it was published on the 24th. Since he was only looking at how things affect each team for the 2024 season, things that, contracts and money spent wasn't necessarily factored in there. So keep that in mind. So I'm pulling it up right here. If you're watching, you're going to watch on the podcast because we're not putting this elsewhere. The Bears ranked second overall. So if you look at last season, they had a minus 19 point differential last season. So far this offseason, they added 26 points of value throughout a season, which would have had them projected for a plus 7 point differential. When you look at this, Brad, what are your thoughts on it, especially when when most people are kind of upset about the Bears offseason until they traded for Keenan Allen?
Yeah, it's a cool article. I read this and it was good work and very interesting how he approached it and kind of how he boiled it down to one number. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is maybe fans are upset about the value too. I don't think he's saying Keenan Allen. I'm sure he's just mapping his production, and he was obviously incredible last season. Not saying, oh, he's 32 and is on a 1-year, $23 million deal. So you obviously look at it differently, but I liked a lot of what they did. I'm glad they had 2 interior offensive linemen. I think it'll be a battle in camp between Bates and Shelton. I think both guys are clear upgrades at center over what they had last year. And whoever doesn't win the job both guys have played guard before. So you also then have a guy that can back up both right and left guard. I think they approached that well. I mean, DeAndre Swift was good last year. He is a good 3-down back. He can catch the ball. He can pass protect fairly well. I just think it was funny that it was like the first signing in the entire free agency window for any player. And I'm like, okay, like we all want an edge and a center, and like they signed a running back 5 seconds into free agency. So, but he's a good player. And the deal also aged well there. Once you saw Saquon and Josh Jacobs and all these guys sign deals, we're like, at first I was like, are they crazy? And then I was like, oh, well, it's going to be a good offseason for running backs, and they obviously know that. So, yeah, I like what they've done so far. And now you drop in 2 top 10 picks. I think they've had a good offseason.
Khari, what do you think, knowing that Bears had the second best offseason, according to this metric?
I mean, it's interesting you bring up the running back thing, because I know that we talk about the running back position being undervalued these days compared to what it was when we started watching football. I do think it's interesting, though, because one thing that the Bears really could have used last year was a running back who could catch the football out of the backfield. They didn't really have that. And, young quarterback one way or another, I think obviously they knew what they were going to do, but that was going to make sense no matter what. And so I'm glad that they addressed that. I would still like to see them, get a young running back in the draft. I know that I've seen a couple of people suggest that, hey, maybe Khalil Herbert could be trade bait. I mean, personally, like if you felt like you could get anything better than a 6th round pick for him, that I could be interested, but it's also not a problem at all to keep him on the roster. I mean, the guy can clearly run the football. He's got some juice. I think when I look at this, from covering the New England Patriots back, I started in 2021. It's hilarious, actually. The week before I started, the week after I started, I should say, was free agency. And everybody was telling me, the Patriots don't really sign anybody. They're not really going to go that hard. And they went and signed everyone because it was coming out of COVID and nobody wanted to spend the money. And the Patriots just happened to have the most cap space in the league. And so they were just like, we're literally going to sign everybody. And they signed people to deals that in the end were pretty good when you looked at it. But what that ended up taking a team that was completely bereft of talent the year before and took them from a 7-win team to a 10-win team. Now, obviously, you look at what happened after that and you say, well, they didn't really progress from there. I don't know that was the roster's fault entirely. There were a bunch of other issues with that. But just in the short term, the additions that they made netted them 3 wins. I think it's not hard to look at the Chicago Bears being a 7-win team last year when a lot of us think they probably could have / should have won 9 or 10 games and see them actually winning 10 games this year, given what they have done and what they probably will yet do, which, again, the number 1 pick in the draft is going to be the big domino here. Does Caleb Williams end up being that guy, that at the worst doesn't screw it up for you and at best elevates you and has a really, really good rookie season. But I think that when I look at that value on paper, what that tells me is that the Bears are probably on track to add at least 2 to 3 wins to this team.
Yeah, definitely just a cool way to look at things, especially when, again, you looked across Bears Twitter, you looked across, some pundits or even, people that we have all talked to and were quite upset about the off season. And then when you look at it that way, it's like, all right, you know what? Maybe actually when you look at it, it's honestly, actually better than you think.
Me personally, I am kind of confused about that. Like why one would be upset. Because I feel like what we fall into, I'm going to try and be real brief with this.
I don't know if that's possible.
I think sometimes we feel like the Bears have to do this. They have to address this position or I'm going to be mad. They have to get a great center or I'm going to be pissed. They signed a running back. Come on. What are you doing? But I think when you add it all up, it feels like very sound stuff. And then you throw the Keenan Allen deal in and it's like, okay, we're good.
One last thing I want to look at before we dive into our mocks here.
You like that?
I liked it. That was great. the please don't do it.
No, don't do it. Please don't do it.
This is a Kendrick household.
Kendrick, let's be real. We're gonna end up looking at players we want to draft, but I want to ask each of you: is there a player that, if the Bears ended up with this one, a likely scenario, right? Is there someone that a realistic draft pick that would upset you. So, Brad, is there someone that if the Bears took this person, then value is not really the question here necessarily, but like if they took this person, whether it's early in the draft or later, you'd be like, you know what, that doesn't float my boat.
Yeah, it's not a value thing. It's Jared Verse for me. I don't think he's a top 10 pick. I really don't. He's a good football player, but to me, he's like not very bendy. He's 23 and a half years old right now. I think he should be a first round pick, but like to me, I think he's like a Jermaine Johnson fall to like the 20s type of player. I don't see top 10 tape when I watch Jared Verse.
Khari, what about you?
Dang, he's a Scorpio. He's almost got my birthday. Look at that. That's interesting. Okay, real quick follow up on that. If the Bears traded down to like 13, would you be okay with it?
I still wouldn't love the pick for the player, like in that range. But if you get the extra draft capital, then yeah, I'm much happier about it. But I still would say that's a bit of a overdraft in my opinion. But yeah, I mean then you're getting a third or fourth, and then you can obviously add more talent. So I'd be less upset for sure.
Yeah, I feel what, honestly, the person whose comment just kind of floated across the screen actually tipped that in my brain. I love Jackson Powers Johnson, but from a value perspective, again, I don't want to see that pick in the teens. And that sounds crazy. Maybe to people who really love him and saw what he did in the Senior Bowl, really good player. But I feel like with that second first round pick, whether it's 9 or in the teens, that's got to be a premium position. Okay, it just has to be. I don't want to see a center. I don't want to see a guard. No point. And again, I like Jackson Powers Johnson. Think the guy's going to be a beast, unless for some godforsaken reason the Bears traded down to like 26. Other than that, I don't want to see it.
Yeah, I mean, if they had been able to pull off, if Justin had netted a higher pick, or there's some way you could have gotten a second rounder or something of that nature. Yeah, Jackson Powers Johnson, Zach Frazier, some of these guys that are late first, early second kind of guys, you can have that conversation, but that's just not the world we live in.
I feel like we see a lot of mocks where it's like, oh yeah, trade down to like 16 and get Jackson Powers Johnson.
Yeah. Mine is Laiatu Latu. I want nothing to do with him. And obviously for me, as a physical therapist, as the resident doctor here, I
don't disagree with you.
How many guys have you seen drafted in the first round that have had neck fusions? I can think of one, and that was Leighton Vander Esch. He just retired. He's out of it after a 5-6 year career. For those who don't know, he had his first neck injury in 2019, and he was diagnosed with a narrow spinal column, so he underwent a fusion. After he missed 2 games in 2019 and 2023, he missed 7 games after another neck surgery, and then the second one was season-ending IR and then retirement. I mean, after that surgery to fix it in 2019, he still had his fingers would tingle. He had numbness throughout his forearms. Upper arms would come and go. Shoulders didn't do what they wanted to do. Strength was mostly gone. I mean, and those are the symptoms of a pretty much successful neck fusion. Because at the end of the day, the point is not to move. You're taking those segments. You're saying don't go anywhere. So things above and below have to work significantly harder. You have compensations. I'm not worried about year 1, year 2, year 3. I'm worried about year 4, 5, 6 for, in theory, what would be, because you're trading down in theory, you're taking this guy. To me, that's a waste of a first round pick. I mean, if you want to take him later in the second or third, because whatever, then sure, we can have that conversation maybe. But for me, I want nothing to do with it. It scares the hell out of me. Even on tape, to me, he's a bit of a one-trick pony. And I think he may have kind of tapped his potential. I don't know that there's a lot more that we're really going to see out of him personally, just because of his age, things like that.
I like it. Hey, bring in the heat. You're the doctor. You tell us. What do we know?
I don't have his medicals. I don't put that out there, obviously. I haven't seen the dude, but like best case scenario, I don't like where ultimately that can go. So
I feel like the medicals scare me more than the actual evaluation of the player. He's a decent athlete. Like I feel like he's more of a technician. And the thing is, I feel like the more I watch players, the more I realize you can grow as a technician in the NFL. You can grow a lot. And so just because you're not an incredible athlete doesn't mean you're not going to get better. But again, and Brad might dunk on me for this, but I feel like if you were in the mid-teens and you had to pick between one, I'd probably pick Jared Verse instead of instead of Latu because he has the athletic stuff. Because he does have the kind of raw explosion. You're right. He is not terribly bendy. There's a lot of refinement that needs to happen. But if you're talking about just straight up raw materials, and you're just like, hey man, let me grab you and like watch Montez Sweat do stuff. Okay, just do your thing. Just attach yourself at the hip to him and watch him do stuff. I feel like I could see like, okay, take that plus the athleticism, and then you might be cooking with gas, as opposed to a guy who's like, the physical ceiling is probably a little bit closer to earth. Plus, I mean, again, haven't seen the medicals either, but it concerns me. I'm not sure that he's going to play 10 years.
I'll just real quick. I would agree where it's like you don't like. I think it's not even a debate that Latu's the best technician, but yeah, that is more teachable than teaching a guy to be a freak athlete. And I also just like to mention Montez Sweat because he was a ridiculous athlete that wasn't the most refined player at Mississippi State, and now he is who he is. So, and he was picked 27, I want to say, after a trade up by the Commanders. So, take Jared Verse there.
All right, that brings us to mock draft
We're
time.
cooking, bro. Look at this.
So good. As always, we got to play our little disclaimer.
The purpose of this mock draft is to help the hosts of Bare Bones better know the prospects of the 2024 NFL Draft. They are sharing this information so you, the follower, don't have to grind tape and scouting reports as you wait patiently for the Chicago Bears to make their selection. This is not meant to be predictive. If your favorite prospect was not selected in this mock draft, check out a previous or future mock as they may be included there. If they are never selected, oh well, get over it. Taking these mocks too seriously will result in headache, nausea, diarrhea of the mouth, cold takes exposed, troll status, tool status, and undying love for a prospect who gets cut before week 1.
That last
Beautiful.
one kills me every time.
Because it happens every year.
It does.
It does.
So, first off, all three of us, surprising to no one, took
Do
Caleb
we even
Williams.
have to really? Okay, you gave him number 0. That's cold.
The thing that's annoying actually is I actually had like an animated thing and it's not working, but it is what it is. But Brad, why are the Bears taking Caleb Williams?
Do we even have to do this?
Yeah, I mean, the physical ability, the tools, the arm strength, the arm ability, throwing weird arm angles off platform. Also, Khari and I's favorite thing now, he's a hooper. He just like it moves at a different level and just like navigates the field. But also, pushing back on the narrative that it's all out of structure. It's not. There's so much good in structure film on tape. I think he sees the field incredibly well, even with the high time to throw all that. We were looking at sacks taken. If you only look at 3rd and 4th down, or when you're down by at least 8 points, or by the 4th quarter, and all those things, and then kind of reevaluating like with that context. And he jumps up, and the other guys, it helps all of them. Obviously, you're going to take more sacks in that scenario, or have a higher average time to throw. But it adds more context, even the negatives that we do see with Caleb Williams. But yeah, I think he has been the whole time like the clear number 1 guy in this class. I think he's a special talent, and I cannot wait for him to be a Chicago Bear.
Khari, you took him too. Why did you take him?
He's the best quarterback in the draft. I mean, I think that there are reasons to look at somebody like Drake May and say, oh, he's 21 years old. He can reach, a similar-ish ceiling. And I can see a scenario where that happens. Or you could say, oh, Jaden Daniels, like he probably come in and, win the locker room and all that good stuff. And he might be better than you think. He showed some good improvement in his final year in college, even though he's 48 years old coming into the league. Somebody actually flashed some stats over here that I'm going to reference here in a minute. But in the end, Caleb Williams has the most arm talent. He's the most creative. He also, and again, this is something that I've noted, played. I mean, his footwork in the pocket and just some of the little things that he does. I actually went back and watched some Justin Fields from college, and I actually thought Justin Fields had better fundamentals at Ohio State than he had, at certain points in the NFL. But even then, I thought Caleb Williams were better. And I think the thing that you mentioned, that he's a hooper, he can just do stuff that doesn't make sense. Some of the throws that he makes, his arm just moves independently of his body. And I'm still trying to figure out how in the hell that works. It's pretty remarkable stuff. And I think ultimately, look, if Ryan Poles feels satisfied with this pick from a personal standpoint, Bears fans should be ecstatic, because that's one of the biggest things to Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus is the person. And if he passes that test, then to me, that means the Bears are about to go off. because that means they found the dude that encompasses all of it. And I know we've heard a lot of things about Caleb Williams, and a lot of it, has been kind of overblown and talked about to death. But I think that he projects a guy who he wants to be great. He wants to be great at football. He wants to be one of the best to do it. And that's been driving him this entire time. So, yeah, I would love to see that for the Chicago Bears. Why wouldn't you?
I mean, it's pretty straightforward, right? 2022, he had 5+ passing touchdowns in 3 games, which was tied for second in the FBS. 2023, 9.4 yards per attempt, which ranks 9th in the FBS. Even if you want to consider 2023 a down year, he had 30 passing touchdowns, which was tied for 9th in the FBS, all with a worse offensive line and weapons than he had the previous year. Over the last 2 seasons, PFF ranked him first in pass yards, first in pass touchdowns, and 6th in pass yards per attempt while under pressure. First player in FBS with 30+ passing touchdowns and 10+ rushing touchdowns in consecutive seasons since Patrick Mahomes. We already talked about, the 3rd and 4th down stat, which is fantastic. I mean, if you really want to get into the cons, he has either
and the red zone statistics. What are
red zone
46 touchdowns to 1 interception or something like that in the red zone?
Pretty crazy. He does need to get his fumbles under control, but if you look at it, was actually pretty cool. Hayden Winks of Underdog looked at Caleb's fumbles and tried to categorize them. Fumbles due to the ground ball snap, running back mesh point, strip sack, all those get counted against the quarterback. When you really look at it, of Caleb's 16 fumbles last year, 5 were quote unquote more his fault. 4 were strip sacks due to a bad offensive line play. 3 were mesh point faults, 3 bad snaps, and 1 drop snap. Obviously, you can argue about how much of that is necessarily his fault, but there's some reasoning behind some of them. Yes, he still needs to put the ball tighter. If you don't want Caleb to be the quarterback of the Bears, it really boils down to some of the other stuff that's ridiculous, right? It's the nail painted thing. Like, boom, I'm rocking painted nails today. I don't care. Nail polish up for Caleb for this podcast. It's not even a podcast technically; it's a live thing. But anyway, it's ridiculous. It's the off the field stuff. The Twitter jokes of wearing a dress to the steakhouse and all that jazz. Like, grow the hell up. You're going to be the one that's cheering on Caleb when it comes to next fall. So just deal with it.
Don't jump on the bandwagon if the Bears are making a deep playoff run and be like, I believed in them all along. I don't want to hear that.
It's ridiculous. I'm up again. So I stuck here at 9 and I got Rome Odunze. It's really interesting. When I try doing these, I really try to just do it once and roll through it. Right? I want it to be natural. But I did do a couple of runs up to the one I did just because I was curious how it would go. And I was getting worried because I would really wanted Rome, but there was not a lot of times he was available at 9. With the PFF simulator, he was being taken pretty early, and I just lucked out that it happened to be when I did my official one that he was there. But this is my dude. If the Bears draft him, I might uncontrollably cry. He's an alpha in a room with Polk and McMillan, who are both going to be top 75 guys. His teammates and coaches love him. He led the FBS with a school record of over 1,640 receiving yards, which ranked 6th with 1,781 all-purpose yards. It's crazy. His RAS was 9.69 before agility training, so keep that in mind. He's a good size, elite ball skills. His positioning, body control, and hand strength are nuts. You saw him game in and game out dominate the other team. Other receivers look to open separation windows with speed or route running. Odunze seems to relish jump balls and contested catches. He has an ADOT of 16.2 and a contested catch rate of 70.8%, which is nuts. He suffered a broken rib and punctured lung, recovering an onside kick versus Arizona. He stayed in the hospital overnight, rested over the bye week before playing the team's win over Oregon. This is a Chicago Bear if I've ever seen one. Per Lance Zierlein, he's a high volume target on the next level that play callers can utilize to mismatch finesse cornerbacks. Elite ball skills are often the secret sauce for top NFL receivers. So it should not surprise if Odunze is a day 1 starter who becomes a top flight wide receiver 1. The comp is Larry Fitzgerald. This is the dude, in my opinion, if he happens to fall at 9. If he's there and the Bears trade back, I will cry. One question I have for you specifically, Brad, regarding this, some people have Cardinals, right, trying to trade back from 4, JJ McCarthy landed, and then potentially move back up. Is this a likely thing, or are we just assuming that because they happened to do it last year?
I think it's very possible. I don't know about likely, but they did it last year. It obviously worked out getting Paris Johnson. They already have an extra first-round pick, from Houston to begin with at 27. So, to them if they got 11 and 23, yeah, it'd be great to have 3 first-round picks. But you're probably in the window now after signing Jonah Williams at tackle and all they've done, where you're like, okay, we need to add some elite talent back onto this roster. They do need depth too. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's very possible. I do. If they go down to 11, I think they're calling, 6, 7, 8, and trying to jump back up. And so I think it's a possible threat for sure, unfortunately.
Which scares me because, right, if you're trading back up, it's probably for a Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze, one would imagine.
Yeah, I think so.
Brad also stuck at pick 9, and the man we just talked about, potentially the Cardinals moving up for, Malik Neighbors, wide receiver at LSU.
So I was shocked by this. I did one run through, and I was gonna start over if one of the receivers wasn't there. I'll be honest. And not only was one of the guys there, but Rome actually went before him. I love all three guys, and they're all tier 1 players. But I think Malik Neighbors is a special athlete. I mean, the dude is an absolute freak. Maybe not as much nuance to his route running right now as compared to a Rome Odunze. I saw Devontae Adams comp that I like too the other day. Not that we're trying to comp these guys to like Hall of Famers, but Neighbors to me, and I like that he gets the DJ Moore comps. I see it. Anyway, I'm not really in the comp business, but is just
Fast DJ Moore.
Yeah. Like they call it the flying 20, which is the second 20 seconds of your 40-yard dash. I would imagine if you ran at the combine, it probably would have been maybe second behind only Xavier Worthy. Like his acceleration and his burst after he gets ahead of steam is like something that I don't think you see like every year on tape. Like he is a freak. Can also make contested catches down in the red zone. Scored 17 touchdowns like the last 2 years, like each of the last 2 years. I want to say something like that. He's just after the catch in today's league where the average at the target has come way, way down, and you need those guys that can make players miss in space or run over some players in space. Like he is that dude. So we're getting prospect fatigue with Marvin Harrison. He probably still is the number 1 guy, but I don't think it's crazy. And I can tell you for a fact, there are some teams that have him as the number 1 receiver on their board. And I'm not surprised by it.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, real quick, before we get to mine, we really got to go to the combine again so that I can try out my internal stopwatch because I hit 5 in a row on the 40-yard dash within 0.02 during the combine. And I was just like, let's go, baby. Like I know what I'm looking at. But I think that's an interesting thing that you mentioned about Neighbors with the last 20, because there are different ways to be fast, right? You can be fast in your first 10 meters or your first 10 yards or your second 10 yards can be really fast. Maybe you're slow out the gate and you got to pick up speed. There are different ways to run a 4.4 instead of different ways to skin a cat. And I think that the thing with Neighbors is you can see the explosiveness in terms of getting up to speed, but then he can run away. I feel like the difference with him, like Rome is a little bit more like, okay, he's a little bit more measured off the line of scrimmage, but you try to catch Rome in the open field, I don't think you're going to do it. That guy's a 200-meter runner from back in the day. He's got the strength to run away from you. So I always find it fascinating to see guys run.
Well, Khari, keep it going because you actually traded off of 9, collecting a 3rd round and a 4th rounder and a future 3rd from the Broncos in the process.
Indeed, this was a scenario in which all the receivers were gone. Dallas Turner was also gone. So I was left with, okay, what do I do here? And how far do I trade back? Because I wanted to make sure I still got a really like a blue chip player, a top player on the board, and didn't just take a position just to take it. So you're going to get a kick out of this one, Brad.
Because you got this man, Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia.
At number 12 overall, he was the top player left on the board. To me, at that point, it was just a matter of, okay, I could be realistic about this and take, a tackle or a defensive end at that point, but just none of them made more sense to me than this. And again, knowing that the Bears are interested in him, it just seemed to make all the sense in the world because, again, as Mason has mentioned, as we've talked about, this is not just your standard tight end. Look, Cole Kmet is your wide tight end. Yeah, he can split out and he can do all that, but he's a guy who can do it all. He can run routes, he can block, he can hold on at the line of scrimmage. Brock Bowers is your mismatch problem. He's your guy that you can't put a safety on because he's faster than them, and the guy that you can't put the corner on because he's too big for them. He is a modern day mismatch nightmare in the NFL from an athletic standpoint at tight end. And to me, the fact that the Bears have already shown this level of interest in him suggests to me that if there's no receiver there and an edge that they don't value highly enough isn't there as well. In the end, you still want to get playmakers for your young quarterback. And you could almost justify this even more than taking a receiver I wouldn't say even more, but it's like if you took a receiver in the top 10, you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, we got DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen is talking about potentially wanting to stay here a long time. Do we want to bury a top 10 wide receiver on the depth chart? And I'm thinking to myself, look, Gerald Everett isn't necessarily guaranteed to be here forever. And Cole Kmet, I mean, look, he's got to keep on producing. You get Cole Kmet and Brock Bowers on the field running around with the other weapons you have. Whew, love it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up Bowers because he actually was someone that I wanted to just mention at the end of the show. It's like hasn't been talked about on Bare Bones and should be mentioned just because I think he truly is an option. I just think you need someone, a offensive coordinator that's going to be creative because you can't Arthur Smith it and say, hey, Kyle Pitts, I'm going to have you block in line. Like, what are we doing? Stop it. Play him where you're supposed to play him. Be creative. Use him like a power slot. Use him like a slot receiver. And I think you can see some pretty productive stuff. I traded back from my next pick. Not going to go super heavy into it, but I got some thirds, fourths, and stuff this year in order to move back just 5 spots. Khari and Brad took the same guy at that pick, round 3, pick 75, because no one else collected any seconds or anything. So great minds think alike. Brad, why did you decide to take Brandon Dorlus, the defensive lineman out of Oregon?
I think I might have Dorlus as the next best 3-tech, and I know he can be kind of like a 3-4 base end or even a 4-3 end. Like he kind of has some DeMarcus Walker build-wise to him, but I like Michael Hall out of Ohio State. But if I, after the Johnny Newton and, Byron Murphy, who is my number 1 defensive player in the whole class. But I thought maybe that's who Khari was about to take it at 12. But anyway, I think I like Dorlus the most next in that next crop of guys. Like, Chris Jenkins to me is not that position. Anyway, he's a guy that, like I said, you could play him at end. You could kick him inside to be a 3-tech. I think you'd want him to beef up and be a full-time 3-tech. I think he has good use of his hands off the line, a pretty good first step, not the greatest first step in the world, but I think he gets off the line pretty well. And then just does a very good job. He's like heavy-handed. He can slap away blockers. He can get through like contact really well. There's a lot of tape where he's like his contact balance for an interior guy. Like he doesn't get pushed off his rush path. And then I think he's a pretty good run defender too. I mean, he stands in there against double teams and I think holds his own a lot. So yeah, it's interesting where they view him positionally or if he's even a guy they're interested in based on his build. But to me, he's a fun potential, smaller, undersized 3-tech and even a guy you could occasionally kick out to the edge.
Khari, what are your thoughts on the man you took here?
And I think, again, you could look at him as he's undersized, right? 6'3", 283 pounds. But I think the length is decent. And I feel like the athleticism is there in order for him to make up for some of those deficiencies. In terms of speed, he also ran a really good 3-cone from what I could see. And I think ultimately, yes, you would love edge. You want to have another good edge here. Maybe you can sign one, or maybe you figure that out in a different way or address it later in the draft. But we're seeing a lot of moves towards interior pressure in defenses because in the end, that's the thing that messes quarterbacks up the most. Like, yeah, obviously you want a destructive edge, but to an extent, you can scheme some of those guys away. But you know what you can't scheme away? A gap pressure, B gap pressure in your face. You can't step up in the pocket. You gotta run, or you gotta get the ball out of your hands. And so I think, and again, we don't want to go here in terms of player comparisons, and I'm not making this comparison, but when you look at some of the undersized, interior defensive linemen, you think to yourself like, well, I don't necessarily know if they've got the skill for that. But the guy who just retired, who's like one of the greatest defensive players of all time, kind of proved that isn't necessarily the way that we should be thinking about it. If a guy is disruptive, he's disruptive. And to use a more recent example of somebody who, is not the greatest defensive player of all time, potentially, I'm meaning Aaron Donald here, Kalijah Kancey was a guy that we talked about as being way too small to necessarily be a pick that we wanted at the top of the draft last year. And Kalijah Kancey's been pretty good. He was pretty good as a rookie. So I think that that's a position you just got to keep on adding to up front. Obviously, you've got Jervon Dexter. You hope he keeps on getting better. But we talked about this as he might be a guy that you want in there as a pocket pushing, and disruptive one technique. And then Brandon Dorlus being more of your knifing, super athletic three technique. I could see that being pretty tough to deal with as they grow into their roles if you went that direction. And look, Justin Jones not being here, that's something to consider.
Yeah, definitely something to factor in here. So Khari got to double dip 2 picks in a row after his trade. He took Patrick Paul, tackle out of Houston. What are your thoughts here on Patrick?
Patrick Paul is a guy that I think athletically can play the position. His technique just needs some refinement. And I talked to a bunch of people at the Shrine Bowl. I know he wasn't at the Shrine Bowl, he was at the Senior Bowl, but people at the Shrine Bowl were already kind of talking about him and trying to get him on their radars, because ultimately I think the ability is there. One thing that he has a tendency to do is bring the hands out wide, and then he lets guys get into your chest and he gets bull rushed backwards a little bit. Or, when he does his kick slide, he kind of waves the hands out wide. You can get Patrick Paul to keep the hands inside and have him be able to punch and keep it square. I feel like you're going to see some rapid improvement out of him. And again, that's a position that you love, Darnell, right? I really liked what he did as a rookie. He wasn't healthy the entire time, but I love the nastiness. I love the athleticism. And you got Braxton Jones over on the left side, who I think has been an overall positive value for sure for a 5th round pick. But you can never have enough good tackle play, particularly in a league where we see very often when guys get hurt, the offensive line play tends to really suffer after that. And again, Braxton Jones, are you going to want to pay him to stick around? I mean, it's going to be time to start thinking about that here soon. And if you can grab a guy who's, a good developmental player in Patrick Paul, and again, somebody that if you're having issues with injuries at guard for whatever reason, you can also think about sliding him inside if you want and play, just best 5. I feel like this is a no-lose situation for a guy that I think has a lot of upside as long as you get him in the hands of a good offensive line coach.
You can never have enough offensive line depth. So after I traded back 5 picks, round 3, pick 80, I'm taking Gabriel Murphy, edge, the other rusher who has a neck. He's not necessarily your prototypical Flus defensive end size-wise, 6'2", 247 pounds, 30.5-inch arms. However, he is skillful and productive. 21 sacks, 37.5 tackles for loss in his career across North Texas and UCLA. 24 games across 2 seasons where he amassed 92 pressures and 14 sacks. In 2023 specifically, he had 8 sacks, 38 total tackles, 16 tackles for loss, and has 152 QB pressures since 2021, which ranks 3rd in the FBS. RAS 8.88, which is mainly hurt by his height and weight, to be honest. And he has a 39.5-inch vertical, 4.68 40 time with a 1.59 10-yard split, which is elite. One of the ways he eases his arm length is how sudden and polished his hands are. Love how his hands and feet tend to be in sync with each other and use that to elude blockers. He can mismatch guards as a stand-up or reduce rusher, and he's instinctive, getting to counter moves. Like we said, if a long tackle can catch him square, Murphy will struggle. He failed to dominate one-on-ones in the East-West Shrine Bowl practices, which was a bit of a bummer. But, his ability to maneuver in the backfield as a deep run defender and pass rusher has merit. So if you're going to get a rusher later, which, I think at some point you do need some kind of pass rusher, and at some point you're missing something because either they're not big enough or maybe they're not productive enough. At this point, I'll bank on production and hope that, the size doesn't matter.
I like Murphy. I think it's a good shout. He's a PFF darling. There's a lot of fans of his here. But anyway.
Oh, that's fine. That's great to hear. I'm glad. If I need an extra job, I can work at PFF. There's a seat open now, obviously.
Thanks.
So I traded back again. Just moved back from 101. The Panthers got my 97 pick, in round 3, and then I got a 4th and a 5th. Whatever. Moving on. With that 101 pick. This is my ode to Quentin Crisco. Follow him at Buckus Stats. I know he's a big fan of Bo Limmer, center out of Arkansas. I can't talk. Standing at 6'5", 302 pounds, he can play both guard and center and brings a lot of play experience in a tough SEC. 40 career starts at right guard, 27, and center, 13. Fits well into blocks, integrating hips and hands. He can get his hips into extension to create space. hits landmarks against wide rush alignments from the pivot, keeps his feet moving on each rep, and I like his feel for blocking angles. Excels on back blocks, lining up various alignments as far away as a 4-eye technique. Khan, he's lacks ideal snap to step quickness, would like to see more mass added to his frame, so a true NFL offseason in a weight room would be great. We have seen how important asses are this offseason, a la Byron Murphy. There was a couple cool articles on that. And he needs to fight butt with butt. A tendency to lean and sit heavily on his feet has created problems mirroring rushers. His run blocking should create an NFL opportunity at center, but the pass protection has to improve. The Bears' current depth chart can let him chill, right, as he learns behind Ryan Bates, as we pretty much are assuming he's now the starting center, as hopefully maybe he morphs into a starter down the road. Khari, round 4, pick 121. You dipped into the running back pool, as you kind of alluded to earlier.
Tyrone Tracy is a guy that was down at the Triumph Bowl. I got a chance to see him up close. I really liked first of all, I like the pass catching ability out of the backfield. Looked very natural at it. Not every running back down there did. I think that's something that I really took note of, is that some guys, you could see the athleticism running the football, but the route running and the blitz pickup wasn't necessarily there. Tyrone Tracy looked good in all of it. And again, I think if there's one thing that I want to see from the Chicago Bears in terms of their running back room, you got DeAndre Swift there. Obviously, he's a 3-down running back. You can leave him in there the entire time. If you keep Khalil Herbert, or what have you, obviously that's a good change of pace running back. But I want to see a guy who's got some burst, and I want to see a guy that can make some big plays out of the backfield catching the football. Okay, groom another one of those guys like that. I think Tyrone Tracy can be that.
I had no real thought process on Tyrone Tracy, so I'm glad I got to learn a bit about him. So
I like that shout. It's a good shout. Oh, another
duo. Like first, Brad and Kyrie were on the same page. Now it's myself and Brad. I will say Brad got him at 122. I got him at 115. So Brad got the value. Brad, why do you like Cooper Beebe?
He's interesting. I don't know if he's the perfect Bears fit, like stylistically necessarily.
Yeah.
Like I think he is a bit heavy-footed, but I mean he's a bulldozer, right? Like and that's actually Zerline wrote the word bulldozer, and that's why it's in my head. But like he's a road grader. He is. I kind of wonder why he's dropping a bit. It feels like he's dropping a bit. Had more buzz, I feel like, before the season than now. But I mean, he's just strong. Like he's just like his anchor and his core is really, really strong. I feel like he absorbs speed to power really, really well. Maybe can lose to some shiftier, bendier guys. And like I said, he's not a bit heavy-footed, is how I would characterize it, which also is how I feel about J.C. Latham, but conversation for a different day. But I think he's like a very, very good, just like, you know what you're going to get. Like he's a big dude that I think can handle the bigger interior guys in this league earlier on in his career. You saw his hands get swatted away at times, like I said, by the smaller, shiftier guys, but he's a good football player.
Yeah, I don't know why the mocks tend to hate him, because they have him down here in the 4th. I feel like he's more of a late 2nd, early 3rd round guy. So maybe just because maybe the fans don't know him as well or something like that. But like you said, he seems like he's fallen down a bit. But, Mauler in the middle, super strong guy. I mean, he only got 20 reps in the bench press, which is weird because he doesn't play that week. He plays much stronger than that. But like you said, I mean, he needs to be more consistent with his hand placement. He can get swatted away too easily. He's super highly decorated, massively built, smart, strong presence. His strong processing skills are also shown on tape when you watch him, but average athletic ability and length narrows that margin for error that he has. May not necessarily be a Bears guy, like you said, just because of some of that. But if he's sitting there in round 4, I mean, you could do a lot worse.
Yes. It was a value pick for both of us for sure.
I had round 4 pick 122. I'm double dipping at edge here because I couldn't really get like a dude. So I'm just going to send masses of people at you from the edge. I got Justin Eboibe, edge out of Alabama at pick 122 here. 6'4", 292 pounds, 7 sacks, 64 total tackles last year, and 11.5 tackles for loss. I like the frame, so he can add some more mass if he needs to. And his nearly 33-inch arms provide the length that he's going to need. Uses that length well to get extension. As a run defender, he's a quick first step combined with great strength, which results in power and ability to knock offensive linemen back. Solid base, solid against double teams. Also good motor, which helps him to retrace and get sacks from quarterbacks trying to step up in the pocket. And he saw multiple times on tape making tackles while being blocked. So just that get off me strength. Khan, not a super fluid athlete, not calm and athletic or quick. His RAS was 5.65, which is just not great. And he did not hit that 1.6 threshold that you like to see in the 10-yard split. He was at 1.79. Slower get off than you like, poor pad level at times. And he's had some injuries, and he had missed 2 games in 2019. And then 2022, he did have a neck injury with missed 4 games. He does have the combination of size, strength, and athleticism to prevent an opportunity for him to develop into an impactful interior defensive lineman in the NFL. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on this guy.
This is the neck injury pod, I think, officially.
Apparently. His at least isn't a fusion. So
what else do you expect?
Yeah.
I have to look at the injuries. I just absolutely have to.
Yeah, you do. I would just say for him, the only thought is like there's just some games where I thought he was great and some games where I didn't see him on the tape. Like it's just very up and down. But yeah, it's interesting, ball of clay for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, same pick choice. Round 4, pick 122. A guy I picked in a previous mock draft, Cole Bishop, safety out of Utah. Khari, go.
Let's go. I mean, I want to see the Chicago Bears continue to add to their safety group. And this guy is, an incredible athlete that can do it all from the safety position. Ran 4.45 in the 40 at the combine. You watch him on the tape, and he is just, again, he is an everywhere kind of player. You see him busting up plays at the line of scrimmage. You see him playing man coverage down the field. Now, one thing that scouts will say, scouting report will say, is that sometimes he has a tendency to, vacate, zone, assignments. And sometimes he can lose a little bit of discipline because he's out there trying to make a play. He reads your eyes, he's trying to jump a route, and then, he gets burned over the top. I feel like a solid place for Cole Bishop to learn how to play the position would be in a safety room with Jaquan Brisker and Kevin Byard. And then to really take advantage of that kind of athleticism and potentially this is a league where you don't play base that much. There's a lot of nickel, big nickel, dime. You could use Cole Bishop in those kinds of alignments to add speed to your defense and athleticism. And again, everybody's trying to find mismatches. And if you can go ahead and develop a guy like this, he's the kind of chess piece that can follow around that mismatch guy that everybody thinks that they have. And he's a thumper. He's a tone setter. He's exactly the kind of guy that I think a Matt Eberflus defense would like. He's going to constantly be hunting the football and trying to make a collision when he gets there.
Any thoughts on Cole Bishop, Brett?
I'm late to the safeties, so I know who he is, but I have not watched safety tape, so I have no takes.
I mean, that's totally fair. At the end of the day, it's not the sexiest position right now.
I just do Bears, so I watch quarterbacks, wide receivers, tackles, and the edge, and then Byron Murphy.
He only handles what matters. Premium positions only.
Yep, exactly.
Round 5, pick 442. I picked Christian Boyd, defensive lineman out of Northern Iowa. He's getting a lot of buzz recently. He was not invited to the combine, which is a little ridiculous to me, but yeah, you got to cut it off somewhere.
Oh my God, that guy! I was watching him. I saw him up close. Nasty.
He set the record at Northern Iowa during his pro day, benching 225 pounds 38 times. If he was at the combine, this would have been the highest number by any defensive player and the second highest overall. He's a 3-down interior lineman with the ability to not only claw gaps on early downs, but pin his ears back and win matchups on third down. And then he would raise the question if he could transition from small school to the NFL. Boyd was a standout at the East-West Shrine Bowl, which I'm sure Khari could attest to. His ability to not only show up, but dominate Power 5 competition at the Shrine Bowl, got rid of any of those doubters. He's not an elite athlete, but he maximizes the gifts he does have. He's strong enough in the lower body to hold up the point of attack, and violent hands and long arms to ward off blockers. He is a 5-year player, so he's a little older. At his height and weight, there's no getting around the fact that he's exceptionally short arms, little stubby ones, comparatively. Doesn't have a consistent counter move, so he has to win early. Lacks speed to chase down plays from behind, and doesn't really bend that well, shows stiffness. On passing downs, he's limited to an interior role. That's what he is. But, despite lacking those elite explosive and length, there's a lot to like about his tape, a lot to like about what he did at the Shrine Bowl. And he's an all-around good player whose natural position is the 3-tech, but could slot in as a 1-tech in a pinch as a nice depth piece.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Khari, since you did get to see him a bit?
When you saw this guy go, whether it was double teams or single combat, their heads, the offensive lineman heads, were snapping back every time.
We're losing Khari, or is that me?
No, I think Khari froze. So we're gonna move on to the
I
next
heard he had a
pick.
great pro day. I like
No.
it. Oh,
But I was
he's
gonna
back.
say Christian Mahogany, one of my favorite offensive linemen, from Boston College. He pretty much dominated most competition down there. Christian Boyd had him on the ground at one point, just slung him down, and I was just like, yeah, that's a problem.
And then Brad, you were saying?
I just heard he had a great pro day. That was the buzz I heard. So, because you said he didn't go to the combine, I think one of the big national guys was like he's the best player not invited to the combine, like comfortably, in my opinion. And then I heard he tested pretty well at his pro day.
I like it all around.
Go.
Good notes. I'm up round 5, pick 149. I felt the need to get a tight end. I was stuck between 2, and I ended up going just because he has been talked about with Dallin Holker, tight end out of Colorado State, standing at 6'3", 241 pounds. He started at BYU, didn't do a ton, and then shift over to Colorado State. He had 767 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns, so a lot better. Not really your traditional tight end due to his size and his mentality. And by that, I mean, he kind of plays soft. I'm saying that nicely. His play speed is okay, ran a 4.78, and that kind of shows on tape. He shines with his pass catching and ball skills, though, and can make contested catches and run most routes that traverse the first and second level. He does tend to drift on his routes, resulting in higher number of contested catches. Play speed fluctuates due to poor focus in running routes. Not a big yards per catch guy. So with this, I'm taking him because, I kind of want that backup pass catching tight end if something were to happen. If Cole got injured, if there was an issue with Gerald Everett, he's not going to stand there and block for you. He's just not. But he's just an interesting guy to throw a pick at round 5. There's someone I'll mention afterwards who I was deciding between, but I think
so. So he's another guy that I saw. If you would allow me to,
no, go for it. I didn't realize you knew too much about.
Yeah,
Dallin.
so he was also down at the Shrine Bowl, and one thing I noted about him is just the body type differences between him and say like Tip Raymond from Illinois, who is like your kind of traditional, just like cut from a cloth, like tight end type. Whereas like Holker's a little bit more just like long legged and kind of like more slight looking. He played a lot of like fullback, and he feels to me like an H-back kind of guy. He's a movable chess piece. So yeah, you're right. He's not going to be your traditional tight end, like a Y tight end. He's probably not going to be your U tight end either. He's going to be a guy that you're going to throw in and move around. They kind of play more of like an H-back or a fullback kind of role in the NFL. But the main thing is that he's versatile enough to do and to try anything. I was really impressed by that part of his game.
I like the flexibility. That's cool. So we have our drafts here, all 3 of them. Just a quick recap. I took Caleb, Rome, Dunze, wide receiver, Gabriel Murphy, edge, Bo Limmer, center, Cooper Beebe, guard, Justin Iboibe, edge, Christian Boyd, defensive line, and Dallin Holker, tight end. Brad came away with a smaller but powerful draft in Caleb Williams, Malik Neighbors, Brandon Dorless, and Cooper Beebe. And then finally, Khari finished with Caleb Williams, traded back, got Brock Bowers, Brandon Dorless, Patrick Paul, Tyrone Tracy, and Cole Bishop. Is there anyone, I'll go to Brad first on this, that you almost like a regret you wish you could have had in this draft, but it just didn't work out for you, or an honorable mention, you could say?
It's a good question. When I was in the 4th and it came down to BB, who I do like, and I agree with you, like he'll probably go earlier than that in reality. I was sitting there though, and there were, so I watched some of the corners, and like, I'm trying to think who it was. Like Kyrie Jackson was way gone by then. I forget who it was. There are, though, I think some interesting early day 3 corners. I don't even know who the names were. And I know this team is already loaded at corner. I totally understand that. But like I like the depth of that position for some spots. And so I remember sitting there thinking like, I could have taken this guy potentially. And then safety too. Like I also think there's a lot of guys that are at safety are going to go late 3rd through the 5th that are like potentially good players, guys that can turn the ball over, good speed, a lot of skinnier players, like smaller guys. But because I don't know if we get a top 50 pick at safety, but then I think we'll get a run of some solid players after that.
Cool. Khari, how about you? I mean, so Khari and I, right, the rule for this whole thing was we could only take a player once and that whole thing. Is there anyone that you wish, like, man, I wish I'd gotten to this person, but it just didn't happen?
Honestly, my answer is no, because I've already drafted pretty much everybody else that I want at one point or another. I think the only thing that I was kind of bummed about, honestly, though, I think that there's, certainly a realistic component to this, is getting to the point where like, damn, I actually have to trade back right now. Like that's kind of, it's like, ugh. Because there is a part of me that was like, I wish that there was a better edge candidate at 12. I would have, I mean, Chop Robinson was there, but I feel like Chop Robinson is
it's
probably
not really for Chop.
later in the first round kind of guy to me. And I mean, Jared Verse is a guy that I've already picked, so I wasn't going to pick him again. But it's just kind of one of those things where I'm like, I'm sitting at number 12 and just thinking to myself, like, okay, realistically, who's the best player here? So that was kind of a tough one for me. But yeah, I've drafted everybody else that I want. Thanks for
there's a couple names on my list. Cedric Johnson and Xavier Thomas, both edges.
Already drafted Xavier Thomas.
Yep, you already had him. Malik Washington, you took as well, was another player.
Already drafted Malik. We see, I'm okay. Okay, here's one that I probably should have thought about more is Taj Washington, because he's a guy. The other Washington who was very good down at the Shrine Bowl as well. Caleb Williams' favorite guy. Get him on the Bears. Let's do this.
Bernardo Green, just what he was able to do against Neighbors and Thomas when they played LSU, wild stuff. So if you could figure out how to get him, that'd be amazing. Danny took Isaac Garendo, but I think he's just a toolsy guy that's getting undersold. Greenfield off the tackle out of South Dakota State, just an athletic guy that needs a chance. We already talked about Brock Bowers. He was on my list, but luckily, Khari, you took him. Don't have to touch on that. The guy that was assigned with that last pick was Ben Sinnott, the tight end fullback out of Kansas State. I just think he's very interesting, but without too many things on him. And then lastly, Jalen Polk. If you miss out on Rome Odunze, it's kind of funny because, they were teammates. He's kind of like Rome light. So if you don't get Rome, you could potentially get him later just because they play similarly, but obviously Polk is just more limited. There we go. Q in the chat. Ben Sinnott rules. He absolutely does. Brad, thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, I know you're going to be your hard guy to get a hold of. I mean, making all your appearances on NFL Network and, shining. It's great you make time for the little guy.
Yeah, thanks so
much. That's look, I got to do what I can. Now,
remember us, when
we're DMing all day long every day. Like, I'm not in the Twitter DMs 24/7. But no, I appreciate you guys a ton. Obviously, I think super highly of both of you. This is a lot of fun as always. Thanks to the chat as well. Also, Ben Sinnott, the top 30 visit for him is very interesting to me. Because Shane Waldron likes to get weird with his alignment with tight ends. You were talking about using those guys creatively. He is a guy you can line up literally anywhere, but that's not the point of my answer here. But anyway, thank you a ton. I appreciate you.
All right. That's all we got. So for bare bones, we talked about, it's going to be a little different. When news comes out, we'll check the Twitter feed for myself, Khari, Second City, as we figure out where we're going to be putting, hopefully, the podcast version of this. Until then, we're going to be checking out YouTube, Twitter, Facebook Live just to watch them. You can always watch it later. We are going to have that live war simulation draft with, actually, funny enough, Q pops in the chat here because he's going to be there. It's going to be myself, Danny, Khari, Quentin, all deciding and arguing about who we should take and win, depending on how long they take. Maybe we get through 2 mocks, or because myself, Khari, and Danny like to ramble forever, it's probably going to be 1. But thank you so much again to Brad for joining us. Thank you, Khari, for popping in, of course, as you have been every other episode or so. We're going to figure out what we do for potentially a live show. We're not sure yet. Maybe we do, maybe don't. But that's all we got for today. Bear the hell down, everyone.